I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors for Monday, December 14th, 2020. Start with our normal introduction to virtual meetings.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening. This is the December 14th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting's been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a virtual meeting conducted using the Zoom telemeeting platform. Additionally, the township's conference bridge has been made available for those that cannot join by the webinar. Conference bridge can be accessed by dialing the township's main line at 814-238-4651 and entering extension 3799 when prompted. If you're joining the Zoom tonight as a member of the public, if you can just enter your name, municipality of residence, and if applicable, the topic you wish to speak on by using the chat feature beneath the word bubble at the bottom of your screen. I would appreciate that for recording in the minutes. And prior to beginning the meeting, just a couple of procedural items to cover. First, the meeting has been structured as a webinar, which means that attendees will not be permitted to speak unless acknowledged by the chairman and enabled by the host. I can provide instructions on how the public can engage and speak on behalf of any agenda item at the appropriate time. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes can accurately reflect the action taken. And then lastly, I will take a roll call of the Board of Supervisors to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate you're here when your name is called. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Danini.
Here.
Mr. Mitra.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. Thank you.
First item on the agenda is citizens' input for anything that is not on this agenda for tonight.
Mr. Chairman, we do have two raised hands in the chat.
Okay.
I'll bring Mr. Mullen, Kevin Mullen, on to speak now.
Okay, thank you.
Mullen, you're enabled.
Hello, this is Kevin Mullen. I'm a homeowner in Ferguson Township. I have a statement and a question for you. My statement is I think the UAJA overbills me and has for 21 years in multiple ways. I set up a website to detail everything, what they did to me, how they treat me much worse than everyone else. The website is statecollegereport.com, statecollegereport.com. And my question for you is, did you choose your new UAJ representatives yet? And if you chose anyone other than me, I would like to set up a public meeting with them and talk about my concerns with them in the future whenever you choose whoever you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That appointment will be made in the first meeting in January. I believe that's January 4th. So the selection will be made at that time.
And secondly, we have Wes and Christine Glebe. I'll bring them on. Okay, you're on. Wes and Christine, you're on.
They're muted.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah, if you want to, let me see if I can.
Hi, this is Christine. The topic in question is 1004 West College Avenue, which is on the corner of West College and South Butt Street. The proposed plan is to create a brew pub and restaurant in the building. It's in the terrace streetscape, but because it's presented as a minor alteration plan ordinance 22-306.2, then neither you as Board of Supervisors nor the Planning Commission will ever see or review this plan. This excludes the public also, and this is an egregious lack of transparency for something that's going to have a profound effect on our neighborhood. After 10 years, this is only the second proposed development in the Terrace Streetscape District, but only some of these ordinances are being applied or implemented and others ignored. Why? On the drawings, the alley between South Butt Street and South Osmond is a 20-foot right-of-way, but in fact it's only 16 feet wide because the width is dictated by the layout of the parking bays and a utility pole. A 5-foot sidewalk is required by ordinance along the alley, but there's insufficient space. There's not adequate sidewalks in the adjacent blocks for what will be increased foot traffic. The original plan for the Brew Pub restaurant was proposed as having 98 seats with 14 more bar seats. But now an additional permit is also under review, issued October 21st, 2020, that will add a large fenced area. If it's for outdoor dining, it may double the number of patrons. Not only that, but adding a distillery to boot. This level of potential patrons, 250, makes me wonder if a traffic study should be done and whether the parking already reduced by the outdoor dining space is adequate as proposed. The terrace streetscape requires outdoor lighting to be installed. There is no lighting plan. There is no lighting except for the required dusk-to-dawn light at the front corner of the building. There will be pedestrian and vehicular traffic, and for the safety of all, there needs to be appropriate lighting. This project necessitates a professional engineered lighting plan. There's no sign on the building except the address in the window, so any signs for the brew pub will not fit the minor alteration plan number 8. West College Avenue frontage of 1004-1006 has 303 feet of contiguous lack of curb. According to the terrace streetscape, there can be no vehicular access except from secondary streets. The ordinances also require landscaping with trees and planters along West College, as the Yocum property will be doing. This will necessitate curbing where it is lacking. Landscaping is in the permit language, but there is none. There are also 2 through driveways on the properties that would have to be blocked at both ends as they're non-compliant with the terrace streetscape ordinances. The parking area along the alley behind the building should be made one way, entering from South Butts and exiting at the other end of the lot to South Osmond Street with appropriate signage and lighting. The parking spaces on the left side lot are angled appropriate to one-way entering from South Butts. The other side of the lot are right-angled spaces that allow cars to drive straight onto the alley, which is a traffic hazard. Each space should have a parking block and all spaces should be angled. Because of the lack of space, the alley, sidewalk, and parking all need serious analysis. Thank you.
Can't hear anybody. Steve's saying.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Christine. I think I would like to ask staff to address one issue that's been raised here, because I think it might not be clear to the board or to citizens. The difference between a minor alteration and a new land development, and why this would be considered a minor alteration plan, because that addresses why other stipulations don't apply.
Sure. I can take part of that, and then if Jenna, as planning director, has anything she wants to add, I can pass it along to her. But the definition for a minor alteration plan is fairly well established under Chapter 27 zoning. There are specific requirements that have to be met by an applicant in order to fall under the minor alteration process. A change of use, for example, in many cases, does not trigger, so to speak, the need for a land development plan to be submitted. In the Terrace Streetscape District, the one, I guess, distinguishing factor, or one of the distinguishing factors, is that parking is not set by use. Rather, it's set by square footage of building space. So what may have, in some cases, in some zoning districts, triggered a land development plan by virtue of the need for additional parking spaces, in the Terrace Streetscape, it does not. I think in the note that Ms. Bailey read, I think there are some inaccuracies to it. There are some components that maybe aren't as clear on the plan that was submitted, or the permit application that was submitted, that maybe Jenna can highlight. But essentially, there's a threshold for a land development plan requirement that in this particular case was not met. It's true that there have only been a few projects that have been submitted over the last 10 years or so in the Terrace Streetscape District. But we have had other plans come through under the minor alteration process. The Suzuki dealership is one of them. And I think one of the issues, so to speak, that the board has talked about trying to address in the TSD over the years has been that I think the way that the ordinance is laid out, it incentivizes an applicant to try to keep the alterations to a minimum so that they don't have to go through the land development process and therefore do not necessarily have to construct the same design standards that you would otherwise, that the board wanted to see with the development of the TSD. So Jenna, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but that's the Cliff's Notes response, I think.
Yeah, I mean, very accurate. I have the minor alteration requirements up if you'd like me to share them. I also have the minor alteration plan available. The idea with minor alteration, it's for internal rehabilitation of commercial buildings. And that is essentially what this applicant is doing based on review by the zoning administrator, myself, and the township engineer. They are meeting all of the 8 requirements to be considered a minor alteration plan. And in this situation with the Terrace Streetscape District, the change of use does not require more parking because the building size is not changing.
That's not the building size.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, at this point, we're not really, this isn't an item for any action by the board, but I did want to get, just address what minor alteration means, since it's not, it's the sort of thing where the name may not fit everybody's definition of a minor alteration, but it is laid out what is involved, and it essentially applies to the footprint of the building more than anything else. So.
It's not to say that it's not a valid point that Ms. Bailey raises, and it's something that presumably the board will look at as you reevaluate the Terrace Streetscape District. But the application was submitted under current regulations, which do meet the standards for minor alteration in this case.
Lisa.
I have some questions about this, and I don't want to get into it now because, like you said, it's not an agenda item, but I did want to just ask what the timeline is of this particular thing. I mean, is this over with? Is this done, or is this still in the process? Since the board isn't seeing it, I don't know what that timeline is. And then the second thing I wanted to say is maybe this would be something that we should put on a consent agenda to then discuss in the future. If nothing else, it serves as a really good case study for what we want to look at in developments in that area in the future. It touches alleys, it touches College Avenue. There's a lot going on there. So, but I was curious about what the timing is of this.
Yeah, so the timeline is the zoning officer is still in review of the application. There's a certain prescribed timeline under the municipality's planning code that he has to review and provide a response to it. But that being said, there wouldn't be an opportunity for this particular application for it to be reviewed by the board or the planning commission because it is a minor alteration plan. If the board wants to talk about future applications and how it relates to the Terrace Streetscape District, we could certainly discuss that or talk about an ordinance amendment. But for this particular application, it would be an internal review approved by staff.
Laura.
Thank you for indulging us in these questions. So is the Terraced Streetscape District the only one that a land development plan is not triggered by a need for parking?
I think so, Jenna. Well, I don't want to answer it without looking specifically. So maybe we should just respond by saying perhaps. because as a TSD, and it's not to say that other applications, for example, couldn't change use without triggering land development. It happens frequently. A change of use in and of itself does not require a land development plan be submitted, does not require a traffic impact study, does not require stormwater, et cetera. It depends on what the impact of that change of use might be. So in the TSD, one of the land development requirements, or one of the triggers, if you will, for a land development plan would be the need for additional parking. But because the TSD doesn't distinguish by use what the parking requirements are, it doesn't matter what the change of use is within that district, it would not require additional parking, therefore it would not trigger the land development process. It's not to say that there's not other triggers, and there are, and Jenna has the list if the board wants to see them, for land development plans. But in this particular case, not only did they not fall under that obligation by virtue of the need for additional parking, but they also didn't fall under it for any of the other provisions that would otherwise trigger land development.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Lisa?
I'm sorry, that just made me think of a different question. So are a brewery and a distillery permitted in the TSD?
Yes.
Okay, I don't
If
know.
they weren't permitted uses, they wouldn't be allowed to pursue the minor alteration process or any zoning permit for that matter.
Okay, so those are in the definitions. I don't know, but those are.
TSD has a unique, I would say unique, at least even for Ferguson Township, defined use category. But in this case, it's a permitted use by right. And it wouldn't be something that even in some cases, as the board may recall, might have to go through a conditional use process. This is a permitted use category.
Okay. Okay, but it's a restaurant too. So, and even if they were adding lighting and a different sign, it would still be a minor alteration.
Well, lighting would still have to conform to the township's lighting ordinance. I'm not entirely sure what the concerns are relative to the lighting of the proposed project, but they wouldn't have to submit a lighting plan as required by the land development ordinance, but they would not be permitted to violate our regulations or standards for spillover lighting, et cetera, just because they didn't have to go through the land development review.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. If they change the lighting or change the signage, it would still fall under a minor alteration plan.
If they change the signage that is within the minor alteration plan, the minor alteration plan doesn't touch on lighting except when it mentions alterations to the sign, and that's included in the minor alteration process. But as Dave said, all minor alterations have to comply with our lighting ordinances.
Oh, sure. I was trying to see if they would make sure that they weren't something that would trigger the need for a land development plan, or if those changes would still fall under a minor alteration plan. I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm trying to answer that question. Okay.
Okay. We got into a little more discussion than we usually do for citizen comment, but I felt that, there were questions raised that I think the board needed to have some answers from the staff at this point. So that we can certainly look at the terrace streetscape or the questions related to minor alterations at a later meeting if there are questions that the board would still have. So. And with that, I think I will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market Annual Report.
Okay, I'm going to try to bring in Pastor Paul Tomkeel, Deb and Ron Strauss, and Bill Keogh. I don't know that you're going to be able to, you won't be able to participate by video. Let me know if you have issues. Ron, I know you had a little PowerPoint you wanted to share. If you're not able to share that.
Can you hear me? This is Ron Strauss.
Yes.
Yes.
I had a PowerPoint. I guess you can't, I can't display that.
Can you email it to me quick? I can pull it up and then we can just team up on how to move forward. Do you know my email, Ron?
I don't want to take the time to that. I'll just go over some
Oh,
of the
okay.
things that
All right,
I
that'll
have on
work
the
too.
PowerPoint, if that's okay. Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm Ron Strauss. I'm the treasurer of the Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market Steering Committee. Also attending from our group are Bill Keogh and Pastor Paul Tomkeel. Because of your contribution to the 2020 market, we felt responsibility to provide you a summary. We found the most reliable method to track market attendance is by counting cars visiting the market. The count has an impact on parking and traffic, which has never been posed a problem at the market. This year, we actually had a high count of 233 cars at the first market, which really didn't cause any problem with traffic or even parking. The patron count this year was a total of 2,675 cars, which is a 27% increase over 2019. And in fact, since we started in 2018, there's been a 72% increase in actual car count. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we figured there's an average of about 2 patrons per car. So it gives you an idea of the attendance at the market. This year, our market manager did an online survey to help us plan for future markets. We found out that 76% of the people travel by car and 24% by bike or walking. The distance traveled, 35% lived within a mile, 38% within 5 miles, and 18% within 10 miles. So that means that the locals are attending the market, and they're also people are walking within Pine Grove Mills, which is great. The attend frequency, in other words, how often people attended the market, 44% actually came each day of the market. 26% came twice a month. The spending was somewhere between $10 and $20, the average spending. Some people, 9%, spent over $30 at the market. How do people learn about the market? 28% learned by Facebook, 13% by street signs, and 10% by mailer. We actually did 2 mailers this year. We did one before the first market in June, and I think that really paid off. Got quite a few people out. Actually, a lot of the vendors sold out that first day of the market. So we found out that most people are attending the market for fresh meat and vegetables. Found out that the age range is 40% was 41 to 60 years old, 35% were 26 to 40 years old. The COVID definitely changed the market this year. We had to limit the amount of vendors because we wanted to maintain 6 feet between the vendors. But we actually had an average vendor count of 14 this year. The other changes, we didn't have any on-site dining, no entertainment, no community tent, and we had less. We always like to have at least 1 or 2 nonprofits there, so we had less nonprofit attendance. The other thing that it was implemented this year was something that we hadn't done before. Was a lot of the vendors implemented a contactless pickup so that people could order things online and then actually pick them up at the market, and that actually worked out pretty good. We also found out that the adaptation to the COVID mitigation protocol was very good. One of the goals of the market steering committee is to improve community relationship. So COVID really set us back a little bit this year. So our market manager actually did a report of, she actually talked to the vendors to find out what they thought about, okay, how can we modify it for next year? They thought the site location was good, except that some of them commented that there wasn't a lot of traffic on West Pine Grove Road, which is one downside of the location. But they thought the site layout was excellent. The quality of products was excellent. And the atmosphere is very good. Everybody enjoyed the real friendly atmosphere. The vendors rated the hours of operation as good. Recommended by the township supervisor in 2019, we established a reserve fund that can be used for unseen emergencies. We were able to add to that fund this year, so we actually have $2,000 into that fund in case we have an emergency. We actually had to use it, but we put some of the funds that we collected from you or got from you as a sponsor into that $2,000 emergency fund. So anyway, wanted to say that we feel that the 2020 Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market was a real success this year, and we're starting to plan for the 2021 market. And we just want to thank Ferguson Township for the sponsorship.
Thank you, Ron. Did anyone else, either of the other presenters, have anything to add, or just?
Just a thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, this is not an action item. This was just a report. So we appreciate the update. I'm glad to hear that it went well despite all the challenges. So I'll be there again next year. So one of the dangers of having discussion during the citizens' input is that I then jump straight to number 2 on the agenda. So I'm going to backtrack to number 1, which is the coronavirus response report from Township Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief. I don't have a whole lot of updates to provide since my report last week, but of course, more detail can be found by visiting the Center Region Ready Facebook page or by visiting the COG website at crcog.net. We also have a lot of information at the Township's website, as well as State College Borough, which has been generally our clearinghouse for information related to local response efforts. Township administration offices remain closed to the general public until further notice. Staff is primarily working on remote assignments, with some staff still reporting who are not able to remote work. Dropbox is still available and it's checked daily with some for anybody who drops off permit applications, ticket payments, and other correspondence, etc. We remain accessible to the public as needed through virtual meetings and scheduled appointments. The police lobby does remain open to the public for walk-in traffic Monday through Friday during normal business hours. The public is still encouraged to schedule appointments or have virtual meetings with police staff where possible. News from the State Department of Health, as many of you are likely aware, is that new restrictions have been put in place by Governor Wolf. These include prohibitions on indoor dining and alcohol sales, gym and fitness facility closures, restrictions on extracurricular activities and youth sports, and more. Indoor gathering sizes have been limited to 10 people or fewer, and outdoor gatherings are limited to 50 people or fewer. Places of worship are exempt from this restriction, but are encouraged to follow COVID safety protocol. The complete order can be found by visiting the Ferguson Township website or on the State Department of Health webpage. Countywide, there have been 7,344 confirmed COVID cases and just over 50,200 negative cases reported on the State College Borough COVID-19 dashboard. There have been 106 deaths in the county attributable to the COVID-19 virus. And the 16801 zip code continues to report the largest number of cases in the county. And in Pennsylvania, the confirmed number of cases has reached over 458,149 cases as of December 14th. And again, more information on local conditions and response efforts can be found either at the Townships or the State College Borough webpage. Again, I'll conclude my report by thanking residents and business owners of the Township for your patience and understanding as we continue to recover from this unprecedented crisis. I encourage all residents to stay safe and adhere to all local and state guidelines of traveling this holiday season. And I'll be happy to respond to any questions the board may have.
Thanks, Dave. Are there any questions? Prasad.
So I thank you for the report, and I just wanted to find out with respect to our police department, is there a reason to keep it open to foot traffic, or should we restrict that to only cases where somebody really needs to file a report and the law requires to do it in person? In those cases, we might allow people in. I'm just afraid that we will be exposing our officers to infection that way. And can we minimize that or restrict things so that to keep them as safe as possible? I know that when they are going, to visit, answering calls, there's nothing we can do. So that risk is always there. But with respect to the office visits.
Yes, the office, I think, still needs to be open. We get a lot of people to come in to drop off medications. And believe it or not, we get a lot of people that come in to want to file reports. They bring documents with them. The officers wear masks, wash up regularly. And I was going to say, to me, the visit here is really no different to the interaction they have with somebody out in the street. We try as much as we can to handle things by telephone, but quite frankly, some people don't like to talk by telephone, and we handle it in person.
That's a good point, Mr. Mitra. I think, and we'll continue to monitor the situation. If there is things that we can do to be more responsive, we will. But like Chief Albright just said, we get, enough walk-in traffic for, legitimate purposes to file reports and drop off prescription drugs, et cetera, that, we felt it was, and the police lobby is segregated from the rest of the building. So we're able to close that off and, generally control the traffic that we get through there. So we think right now we can still do it in a safe manner without exposing either the public or, our police officers, beyond what they would normally experience. But we will continue to keep an eye on things. And if they worsen or the trend don't improve, then we may make some changes to the opening of the police lobby as well.
Yeah, I mean, as long as with the documents, just like I do with my groceries, if we ask them to submit it in like a Ziploc or a plastic and keep it for 2 days and hand it safely, that's possibly fine. We don't have a glass counter where you can keep people outside and hand things underneath there, things like that, right? There's no place where we can do that, like a reception office where you have a glass separation.
Yeah, when somebody walks into the lobby, they're walking into the public area, and there's glass that separates the lobby from staff.
Right, but can they stay in the lobby side and send you the documents or talk to you?
You would be talking through a glass door, and I'm not sure. I mean,
Right.
a lot of our visits that come in are elderly people with issues with registration plates or just general questions that are victims of scams, and sometimes it's very difficult to communicate with them through a door.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? Are you raising your hand, Eric, or just reaching up? Okay.
He knows where to find me if he has questions.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we'll move on to the next item, which is the Center County Economic Development Partnership Report. I have Vern Squire and I guess Irene Miller here.
Yeah, we
And Dana Price.
Dana
Okay.
Price. Vern,
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. So again, thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight as the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors and staff. This report is going to be a little bit different. In years past, we've shown you certain metrics on what activities we've engaged in and so forth. But as you've heard now in various reports, especially the manager's report about COVID-19, fact, I'm sorry, let me turn my video. I didn't mean to leave it off. COVID-19, we have, had to really, to use the fashionable term, pivot to react to that on behalf of the economy best we can. So that's going to be the thrust of my comments this evening, but I would like to go back in time just to reiterate a little bit about the origin of some of the activities in the year 20. If you recall, it was in a very early part of the year. We were welcoming one of our local companies into a new space. That was done with an effort on behalf of the partnership, and Ferguson Township was a supporter of that, contributor to that. And that announcement contained a statement by the business in question that they would be contemplating announcing or creating, going forward, several thousand new jobs. And I'll touch base on that as we get deeper into this presentation as to, kind of what we're having to do in a reactionary mode, again, as the CCEDP. So while we have the CBICC logo up here, we could put all of our various logos, but in this year, it's been just a collaborative effort amongst partners, Ferguson Township included, and I would applaud your manager and your other staff members for being parts of discussions they're very meaningful in terms of what's going on. So let's dive in. I'll make this as quick as possible. If you have questions, you stop me during, that's fine with me, or you can certainly follow up after we're done. So let's go ahead, and we're going to, as we're screen sharing with you, thank you. We're going to flip the next chart or slide. Again, for the viewing audience, I'm Vern Squire. I'm President and CEO of the CBICC. On to the next one, Dana. Thank you. This response strategy statement is something we had to actually articulate to others, and I don't want to belabor this. You're all close enough to your computers, you can read and see this, and hopefully the viewing public, if they wish to. But just know, when I mention collaborative partners, there are many, and it's not limited to even the ones you see on the screen. Ferguson Township is listed in here amongst others that are key to thoughts of how we both caretake for our economy and also take distinctive actions on behalf of the economy. So let's go on. One of the ways that we've had to really think about economic development this year, especially as COVID started, is how to preserve where we could our economic activity and our economic base commensurately. And one of the ways that really manifested itself, essential ways, was in regards to communications. We had initially pleas from, the state to, and well, even the federal level, CDC, federal government, state government, Department of Health, local units, Mount Nittany Medical Center, others, Mount Nittany Health Systems, but all talking about, behaviors. That was the key, as we all remember. So communicating that out to our membership became intertwined with other issues that we're going to discover here momentarily, but communications was the key. If we could cause behavioral differences, our thoughts were, then we can preserve, the health of the community, not overload the system, and not draw continued negative responses from the authorities, maybe deserved responses, if with high numbers, et cetera, that would actually impugn our economy even further. So with that, again, the communications and the CBICC staff, Irene in particular, really got to work on that. We'll go through some examples here quickly. You do see a highlighted area here on the screen, the CBICC COVID Resource and Response Center. So we archived what we talked about. We had 17 distinctive alert and e-blasts that would go out to people, and we heard from members and non-members alike across the community, but certainly from Ferguson Township as well. Businesses wanting to know about this, what should they do? What should they have to understand? How should they actually interpret the rules and regs, what it meant to them, et cetera. Let's go on. So the communication topics ranged across the board. So Yeah, you see in the middle of the upper page there, or excuse me, of the upper graphic, yellow phase. So we're talking to our membership and the community at large, countywide, again, but about what activities you can and can't do. We talked about masks required, how to stay safe during the holiday season. That was more of a Thanksgiving publication, again, requested by the healthcare systems to say, please, help try to minimize what could be a serious spike following, in that case, Thanksgiving, and so forth. We actually also created a program and took up a mantra with other members as well, and other collaborators, other groups, about being center strong, and trying to again portray there is a county behavior at work here, and that's beneficial to our economy. Let's go on. Communication topics ranged on, as you probably well remember, masks. We relayed some information that was coming out, certainly from the county, the free PPE, and we appreciate those, the commissioners and the county officials for getting that. Also COG and other committees for jumping in and helping distribute that and get that into the community in the right way. So let's go on. We see everything from rent relief program up here. We were putting information out, Federal CARES Act, what you need to know. And we're going to show you another graphic about this Federal CARES Act piece. Unemployment, Governor Wolf, et cetera. We were running the gamut, almost 24 hours a day in terms of trying to get information out very timely and quickly to our community at large. Let's go on. So what you're seeing, a lot of this is developed internally. This particular document on the right side of the screen where it says CBSEC tools to tackle COVID-19, if you look at the headers within, there's one that says individuals, small businesses, and large businesses. This is an effort that we undertook to take the 800+ page CARES Act and reduce it to one page. This was done over the weekend. It was, I think, from Thursday to Monday when the CARES Act, or Friday to Monday, passed. By Monday morning, this was in people's email boxes, and they could look, if they're an individual, what this all meant to them, small businesses, what it meant to them, and large businesses commensurately. So again, I would applaud Irene and many of the volunteers that she sourced around her and that we put together, but I'd ask that this get put together to try to have something meaningful and digestible by, again, the community at large. You see many hot links in this document. We can get you those if you'd like to look later. Also, the $6 million Center County Small Business Grant Pool, that certainly was later in the COVID life in the fall here, but we really worked, I think, diligently in the background to cause a number of the things to happen and the awareness certainly to go up. And so many others are responsible for some very distinctive actions as well, and we want to applaud them. Let's go on, Dana. Events, there were various things, again, back in the yellow phase, the yellow to green transition that resulted in a member call May 23rd. We had various programs about relief in the block grant application. That was part of that $6 million issue, State of the County, which focused on COVID situations, even seminars in how to have your health heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems basically fight COVID-19, but your air handling systems in your homes and businesses be a more healthy situation for all concerned. And then the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, getting that information out. Again, much in the way of communication. Let's go on. Messaging partnerships. We actually, in this program we created called Center Strong, and a pledge that was structured. We had 220 businesses sign on to this pledge. And what the pledge contained was a commitment on behalf of the business to have their employees be masked, engage in cleaning activities on a routine and regular basis in the respective business, that the customers, whoever were coming in, could expect that business to behave in the way that CDC and the State Department of Health were advising to act. And again, I think it was remarkable. We had, again, this 220 plus businesses sign into that. So those pledge commitments still exist. You also see at the bottom some of our other groups. And so these are typically either the Chamber or Economic Development groups, along with the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau in our county as being part of this effort. Let's go on. Facilitating community leader channels of communication. We had several conversations with the university. University was in a very interesting position, and I don't want to speak for them. What I will speak is for just a snapshot of the fact that there were two sides of the street, if you will. University having to take serious actions, make big, huge decisions, unprecedented decisions about bringing students back, and if so, what all that entailed, faculty concerns, so on and so forth. The community side, you know, if there are going to be students in the community, what does that mean? How does the community need to behave? And so forth. So there were various calls, some that we actually orchestrated and structured. You know, so the conversations that were ensuing became more frequent and more intense relative to, again, that community university understanding. Your manager was on several of these calls, and we'll talk more about the task force in just a moment here. Let's go on. Town and Gown COVID-19 Task Force. Yes, it's called Town and Gown. But it's, in my estimation, and I was insistent that we not look at this as a state college, Penn State, right across the street only. This was something that we had to look at as more countywide. And so there are 5 principles, if you will, 5 issues. Dana's got her arrow pointing at those. So as you can read those 1 through 5, and in that hierarchical order, testing comes first, then tracing if testing yields certain results. Then if you can trace who the individuals are, to encourage the appropriate either quarantining or isolation of those individuals. And then enforcement compliance was a tool that was needed to really talk about, you know, how to deal with community behaviors in a different way than student behaviors. They were under more of an agreement with the university internally. And I know Ferguson Township stepped up, and you should be applauded for, I think, taking a reasonable posture in an enforcement way relative to COVID behaviors and health concerns. Messaging and communication surrounded that, and still does to this day. So these 5 are interlocked and will be until COVID is behind us, as far as issues to talk about and be concerned about. But again, I do want to thank Ferguson Township for doing what you did in this regard. Let's go on. So the Town and Gown Task Force, we had these members as kind of, if you will, standing members. And then I know we had the managers on several times for calls, but the idea is really about the enforcement. So when it comes to the larger groups for discussion, the closer in discussions are generally about testing and the immediacy of the behavior group, and that tended to congregate or aggregate in the State College borough area more so, but not exclusively, as you well know. So I understand everybody had concerns, irregardless of the township that you were in. Let's go on. Back to this, type of communique. So the tools to tackle this. So we talked about with individuals. So if they lost their job, where to go? If they had a mortgage, student loan, retirement options, what that meant, safety net programs that were out there. And so this is part of that reach into the community. Now, this even transcended business community. We weren't focused solely on the business community only. We understand if we don't have a healthy community, we don't have a healthy economy. And that's, I would still, stay with that mantra today. If we can't get a handle on COVID, or it gets the handle on us, ultimately, it does affect our economy from a health standpoint and an economic standpoint. Let's go on, Dana. Small businesses, now we're chunking out what you saw earlier in that 1-page dissection of the CARES Act. That's just a little bit more visible detail of that. All the paycheck protection programs et cetera. We're going to have some numbers for you in just a moment, what that meant. But all this data was really uptaken by quite a few people in the community. If you think back, though, you may have in your mind, well, hey, wait a minute, banks did this. They took care of the, some of the paperwork and the programming. That is true, but they got to the banks, through organizations like ours and heavily through ours. I can tell you that is not unlike the opinion from many other communities that I hear from my peers. Chambers were the gateway to get the information to get on down the road into the banks and or SBA or whoever had the respective program in play. Let's go on. Certainly DOH, Department of Health, local community recommendations, we passed those on. We've been in communications. DOH had a call with stakeholders, as they termed this, in the community. And some of those conversations were, again, about how to handle the growing numbers, behavior sets, testing regimes, and so forth. This is before testing appeared in our community, funded by DOH. Not now, as much as the county has been taking that up, but we applaud the county for doing that. Increased testing was the answer, but now the numbers are outpacing our ability to test again. So our results from a test are now quite long again. Let's go on. Holiday messaging. This is one specific, not the exact nature of this document, but the theme of the document was asked by the healthcare systems to, again, try to intercede, as I mentioned earlier, in the Thanksgiving holiday behaviors, group gatherings, et cetera. And so we're going to walk you through. Dana, just kind of click through these pages, if you would. Just keep going till you hit the end. So we quote doctors in health experts in here. We quote CDC, DOH, the governor, all of these about trying to make ultimately a safer Thanksgiving. We try to put the numbers out that were put out. We talk about shop online instead of going in person when possible. Contactless shopping, etc. We're saying here, if you decide to travel, so this is an if you must, that we are not encouraging travel in that way, but if you must, consider traveling during non-peak hours. We just want to make that clear. Up top, more rules about DOH, the 72-hour rule from a test. Okay, Danny, you can go on. Social distancing, all the usuals, just time and again, we're being asked to put those out on the street. We've heard from many that these reminders are useful. And especially for new people who may be coming around the community, they're not sure how the community behaviors are or what the expectations are. And so these reminders that they're getting to see both in signage as well as, social media, et cetera, are helpful. Let's go on. And let's conclude. Dana, go ahead. This one was even another way the state had gradated low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. Yes, we took some graphic license with the turkey and the indicator. Turkey's wearing a mask, by the way. But the idea is I think this was a chart heavily viewed by people on social media. They tended to take a look at this. Let's go on. And that concluded that particular document. So all of this is being self-generated internally through our staff. So I'd really have to applaud them for the time they're spending. Let's go on, Dana. So the community impact, let's get to some numbers. We're going to start up here at the top, where you say 1,808 businesses received loans in Center County. So again, 1,808 businesses received loans through some of the Paycheck Protection Program and other sources. Let's go on around. We're going to go counterclockwise. 403 businesses received grants. Okay. And part of those were the Center County CARES Act, the COVID-19 Relief Block Grant for small businesses. There were a couple of different programs in play. 98 businesses received grants out of this COVID relief statewide small business assistance program. So there was some difference in the names. They sound a lot alike, referencing small business, but they are different programs. Down at the bottom left, 7 businesses received grants from COVID-19 PA Hazard Pay Grant Program. 4 received PA Fresh Food Financing Initiative, Dana one to the right, COVID-19 Relief Fund. 3 businesses received grants from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who at the time was doing a lot of the pushing in D.C. relative to getting some of the early programs through the legislative process. And 3 businesses received grants from Giant Corporation, Giant Small Food Business and Farms Grant Program. And so if we look to the left of this whole chart index, there's a paragraph over here that talks about Centre County received at least $171 million in those programs, and it impacted a total of all these more than 2,300 businesses and more than 20,000 jobs. So it's that part right there, I think, that really sums up nicely the fact that we had an impact. We caused people to act on their own behalf, which made it, it was double time. Anytime they were helping themselves, they were helping the economy as well if they were a business, and they're part of that superstructure. So we have in play here, let's go on, Dana. Some other things going on. We're going to come back kind of in a summary fashion to the COVID activity. There's some other projects that are going on that are beneficial from past work of CCEDP and our group as well. But certainly the partnership has been acknowledging that transportation projects are just some things that are essential to having the possibility for a community to be healthy and to be able to move forward, and literally in this case to be able to move safely in transportation terms. So what we're going to look at here is the I-99 I-80 interchange. It's the Bellefonte interchange as PennDOT would have it, but that interchange affects so much travel in normal times here, and freight management and freight availabilities and so forth of all kinds. So this affects our business community, our healthcare system, our education system, et cetera, safety and otherwise. So these are all particular contract pieces. You'll see some are completed. One is completed, I'm sorry. One is about to be, another would be in July of 23. And so in construction time, this is a fairly fast track to get this going. And then by 25, it would all be done in terms of the last particular piece of the Bellefonte interchange. But that's I-99, I-80. Let's click again, and we're going to see this particular piece. A little hard to read, but if you're talking with your MPO groups, the dotted line from the interior of the dotted line area is referred to as the State College Area Connector Study Area. So inside of that dotted box, if you will, that irregular shaped area, that's the focal point now for the next leg and the final leg of the 322 improvements. And so just to the right, if we were going to go off the map, we would see the Potter Mills activity is concluding and it's open for traffic. That was 6 of the 12 miles of the missing link, the 12-mile missing link, as it was referred to years ago. And now there's about 6 miles left. So the route and some of the, shall we say, discussive items yet to be resolved here, but nonetheless, the MPO, PennDOT, and others are moving forward with this. This is again part of our drive forward push. And recall when Senator Corman and Governor Wolf made the announcement that the state would fund this particular area, in fact, the 12-mile stretch of 322, not just this connector area, but Potter's Mills included. They referenced the I-99 I-80 piece as being the working example of how the state and local officials and the business community could collaborate. The CBICC and our CCEDP started Drive Forward, and that's really the effort that went to DC, got the money, and put PennDOT in position to not repair the old system out there at 99 and 80, but rather replace it properly in a more safe fashion. So one has led to the other. Those are almost $1 billion of improvements if you take the 3 phases together. Let's go on. Switching to, and it's timely that we're following the farmers market report. Appreciate what those folks had to say. Something we've mentioned to you before, and we've really kept at this along with the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau, but in a collaborative way. Happy Valley Ag Ventures is that joint effort between our two groups. And this is on behalf of the ag industry and ag, not just ag tourism, but ag economic development, but ag, evolution, a positive evolution in agriculture in our community on a go forward basis. So you're going to see various pieces here. This is more visual. Let's go on. So we have marketing elements that we've used, marketing messages to go out social media and otherwise. Let's go on, Dana. The Ag Ventures destinations, I'll just slow on this one. You certainly can see where your county area is at, but you see relativity to the stacking that you have as positive attributes for Ferguson Township, and then also, again, what would be otherwise in the community. It has been talked about in time past. I know Ms. Danini has talked about one time a Route 45 corridor. We actually have been working on that. We have a write-up and a marketing plan, now that had to go to mothballs given COVID, but I think we can, when we launch a corridor plan, that the corridor you're on and would extend into other parts of the county would be the first to roll out with that. Not necessarily exclusive, but it would be, I think, at the front edge of that effort to talk about driving routes, a day's activity, how to engage these opportunities from a scheduling standpoint and so forth. Let's go on. And so again, for the farmers market people, we have provided artwork. Again, this was done in our office. And then you'll see several that were applicable here, a couple to Ferguson Township. But these signs were given to these entities, so the markets, and in this case, the cidery, for their use. And we don't have the additional artwork. And again, your manager is a member of this effort, so our Happy Valley Ag Ventures, our committee. And but we have some signs for them at their driveway points, their entry points. They will have arrows, and they can actually then use those as directional signs to get people in and out of their properties the way they wish to. Let's go on. This effort went across the county. So here you see this one happens to be in the Zion area. The difference in signs, look at the one in the gentleman's right hand and versus the one he's left, it has the white arrow. That's what I talk about. So you see these arrows, they can orient the signs, go here, park here, be here, kind of situation. Let's go on. We, HVAB staff and our staff worked up a program called Agtoberfest, again, trying to cause activity to occur not in the densely populated part of the county. This wasn't about putting people in close proximity, but rather trying to encourage some degree of engagement with our county in ways that were socially distance appropriate and or density appropriate according to all the guidelines. And so this program came about, Agtoberfest. Let's go on. And so quite a few pieces of information went out, website, social media. If you'll notice here on the left of that, 2/3 of the way down, October 3rd, Wasson Farm Market was the first of 4 that had, more information and so forth. You'll see in mere moments what that looked like. But so the Ag Ventures information, a selfie station, gift basket drawings, etc. So we worked to try to cause the industry, the ag industry, to not have to suffer when in fact they had a solution just by natural means about having lower densities and open air space for people to gather. Let's go on. And so this is the kind of setup that was at each of the places. And so it encouraged, moderate and modest engagement with any individual. Masks were worn and, photos were taken at distance, that kind of thing. Let's go on. So with that, I'm going to kind of just wrap up here with some comments. So yes, I mentioned various things here, but certainly the partnership in the upper left of this document, the Center Ready program all through COVID has been at work, and it's really been more difficult and yet intense for all the educational institutions as we talk about trying to create a better workforce. So schools having their difficulties, and yet they are engaging the program. We have, I think now over 250 designees, they're called, but think graduates of our program, Center Rotary program, meaning those individuals are deemed to be more than competent in 5 critical areas of behavior in business world. So we have the Adventures program. I mentioned Drive Forward. I would just say in wrap up, I mentioned the business earlier, that in early February or mid-February, we were talking about growth and moving forward and occupying new square footage and so forth. That particular business still has plans to grow. We were trying our level best to help them with, diminished resources on everybody's parts. But that's only one company. There are many companies that are trying to it runs the gamut, trying to hang on. There are some that are expiring, unfortunately, but there are some that are trying to, do everything they can, try new market lines, try to get themselves in a different position with their customer base, if you will. And there are some that are actually thriving during this time, depending on what particular sector of the economy they're in. So I think it's beneficial to note in closing that the Center County Partnership, Economic Development Partnership, is really there when need be in ways to help with everything from, again, in this time, behaviors, opportunity, and really also then trying to vision regulatory behaviors and pathways to achieve outcomes. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate what Ferguson Township has done in the way of involvement in the past, and I'll take any questions and otherwise leave you to your discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Vern. Does anyone have any questions? Well, we're still have the screen sharing up. I can't see everybody, so if any of the board members have any questions, just go ahead and speak up.
Dana, you can stop the screen sharing if you want to take that down. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to find out if I wanted to look at your budget and where you're spending things. Is that available online, or where should I look?
No, the Center County Economic Development Partnership does not have a separate budget, and our budget isn't published that way. If you're after information of what these programs cost, we are unlike most organizations. There are organizations that put out, and our tourism bureau has typically run that way, and again, we collaborate with them. But the what they do is tend to work with vendors. So if you work with the vendor, you have a contract, you pay the vendor, and there's very much a traceable invoice payment system, trail. In our situation, this is done with in-house staff, basically just through talent and grit and determination. So that's pretty much the upshot of it. Is this is done with minimal resources and minimal external expenditure.
Right, but I mean, my objective was to find out, let's say, if the township were to support some efforts, we need to figure out, I would like to understand where is the money going, what is it being spent on, and what its effect is, rather than just a big picture, oh, these are things we are doing and they're great. So that's where I was coming from. And if that information is not there, then it's just not there, and we'll make the decision.
It's not there. It's not there to the general public, no. As a 501c6, that's not something we have to put out. And at this point, I think what we've tried to deal with you is look at this as a partnership along with other entities. You're not the only one that this happens with. And we appreciate certainly the troubles that everybody's in with the activities of COVID. But this is any contributions you make, which have been some years happening and some years not happening at all, we've taken the approach that we still work on behalf of Ferguson Township, even in years you've made no contributions. So I understand the question, but there's not a correlation between the money we get and the money we're working, what we do for you. or for the general economy.
So is there a reason, and whenever institutions do these things, people get suspicious. So is there a reason that you would not want to put out your income and outflow statements, and that you need to hide that?
We're really not going to go down this path, Mr. Mitra. The idea is this.
So there is no reason. Thank you.
No, just stop and let me please finish.
Yep.
This is not about hiding. You're inducing words here. Ferguson Township, you have taxing authority and funding authority, irrespective of what you actually do with the monies. We're inverse. We don't have taxing authorities, and we rely on contributions and investments and cooperations from businesses and others, and that's all we have. We have to look at the output side and what we can get done together. If you find value in what we're doing, fine. If you don't find value, fine. But it's not going to be about we charge a fee or you think our budget is X and Y. It's diminished and it's taken a severe hit this year. Okay. We've been working on behalf of Ferguson Township. You could say to your people, if they don't pay their taxes, you may not offer them services or you shut off their utilities. We don't conduct our business that way, haven't to this point. So I guess we can have a separate conversation another time, but not in this forum.
That is fine. If you want to keep your finances private, that is your choice. I believe that lack of transparency usually means there is something going on and there's some corruption, and I would not support organizations that have this lack of transparency.
This is national with chambers of commerce, 501c6s across the board. They don't have to put that out there for public consumption. That's not the origin of the business. We're a member organization. This is an arm of us trying to deal with the CCEDP, the Economic Development Partnership. This is pretty much a request tonight. If you want to play, do as you see fit. I really have to take a good objection, a strong objection, for you to even induce words like corruption and mistrust. The same could be said for some of the things that, if you really want to get into it, we can have another discussion, but I prefer not. I would imagine your other council members would not, your supervisors on this forum, about anything that we could be talking about against each other.
No, I'm not saying that you're doing that. I am saying.
Yes, you are. Yes,
no,
you are.
I'm not saying that. There is a possibility is what I'm saying. I am saying that usually lack of transparency.
Okay, I think we need to wrap this part of the discussion up. I mean, I see where both comments are coming, and I don't think it's productive at this point. I mean, the comment's been made, so.
That is not why I appeared. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Chair. I just want to say, look, whether you have paid or not isn't our issue. We work on behalf of this community in Ferguson Township, whether you pay us, give any contribution or not. I think it's a fair shake when others around you are doing it sometimes for you to play. You have played on occasion, no question, and we do appreciate that. Let's leave it at that.
So,
I mean, can I respond, because he got a few minutes after that? So
it is. I'm making the presentation. Thank you. I was entitled.
Okay,
to speak to the.
And I'm asking the chair for recognition to respond to that.
Briefly, but
sure. Yeah, and I think that it's. Organizations that lack transparency are things that public government should not be supporting, because we don't know where our taxpayers' money is going and what is happening to it. And so that's I'll leave it at that.
Would you feel more comfortable if we appeared before you in every meeting and questioned your expenditures?
I think for now we're getting to where I'm going to ask you to stop. Okay.
Well, I understand, Steve, but you know where I'm coming from. Too.
And I would ask, do any other board members have any questions or?
If I would just note that I think historically, or at least within the last 5 years or so, since the inception of the Economic Development Partnership, the question before the board, not just with respect to financial contributions or commitment, has been, do you want to continue to be signatory or be a part of the Economic Development Partnership? Meaning, are they taking, not just the township, but the center region at large in a direction that you find beneficial to support the economy in the greater State College area and Center County overall? And, that's been, as I think Vern alluded to, it's been evident in some of the past projects where the township's been approached to participate, in some cases financially, in some cases just a show of support for various projects that the chamber's been involved in and the Economic Development Partnership's been involved in. I think this past year, as we saw in the presentation, it's taken a very different evolution with the onset of COVID and the additional need that our business communities have had with respect to that, and navigating some of the relief mechanisms that are in place and finding some of the support. So, it's really kind of had that, additional application that presumably in late 2019, none of us would have envisioned as a necessity. So, I think what the board's direction has been over the last couple of years with respect not just to the financial contribution to the Economic Development Partnership, but the township's continued involvement in it has been to see, at least on an annual basis or with some regularity, some report back as far as what the initiatives and the major programs are of the Economic Development Partnership and what the partnership's been involved in over the last year, and then determine whether you continue to believe that it's in the best interests of the township. And that in many cases has been supplemented or supported by an allocation from the township's budget. Now, it's not earmarked for that specific purpose, but it's understood that, with the continued support from the township, that there may be consideration for, financial support, providing that. And I almost look at the Economic Development Partnership, at least in some applications, as a service provider, as a contracted service, in the same degree that you might see some municipalities contract for a zoning officer's position or a planner's position or something along those lines, where, because they don't have the resources or the ability to manage that particular initiative in-house or with the resources that they have, that they may contract out in order to achieve not just an economy of scale, but kind of a shared mission statement. So, I think what the question for the board tonight is this Economic Development Partnership continuing to represent that, continuing to advance those interests, not just for the purposes of Ferguson Township alone, but for the purposes of the community overall? And if so, what is the willingness of the board to continue to participate in that partnership?
Okay, and at that, I'm going to take that as Dave's introduction to the recommended motion, which is we have a motion recommended that the Board of Supervisors authorize an appropriation of $25,000 to the Center County Economic Development Partnership. This would be money from the 2020 budget. Normally, we don't take a motion during special reports, but this is the last meeting of the year. So my question at this point is, does someone care to make a motion? And
Mr. Supervisor Chair, our staff can leave and leave you to your business. I don't want to infringe upon your discussion.
That's entirely up to you. It's,
okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it. Okay. We'll go from there. Thank you.
Well, okay, thanks. Seeing that, I will make the motion that the Board of Supervisors authorize an appropriation of $25,000 to the Center County Economic Development Partnership. And it appears that there is no second. So in that case, there is no motion, and we'll move on. Okay. Now we get to the main body of this meeting, which is a whole series of public hearings. That's our normal last meeting in December, is taking care of a lot of business to tie up the end of the year. So we're going to have a whole series of public hearings. And the first one is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2021, beginning January 21st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. So provided with the agenda this evening is a link to the final operating budget. The budget's been been updated to reflect the comments that were made by the board at the December 7th proposed operating budget adjustment. Really, the only change that was made was to reflect the audited numbers that Ms. Strickland pointed out were incorrect in terms of the 2019 actuals. So otherwise, there's been no, real substantive changes I know Eric is here tonight, Finance Director Eric Anderson. If anybody has any questions or if anyone has questions for me, we can respond. This is a resolution this evening, so it's presented for final adoption.
Okay, and this is a public hearing, so before we take a motion, I'll ask if there's any public comment on the item. Seeing no indication that anyone cares to speak on that, I'll ask for a motion from the board.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution approving the operating budget for fiscal year 2021, beginning January 1st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2021.
This is Patty, and I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I think we've had a fair amount. Lisa?
Thanks, Steve. We have. In going through the revised version, this last version of the budget, I need some clarity on the stormwater fund, its structure, and the inclusion in this year's budget. When I was reading through, I was focusing in on the narrative on page 210, page 210, that describes the nature of the fund. So I can just read it if nobody has it in front of them. The program is intended to be self-sustaining with fees based on the amount of impervious area. So my question then was, what changes in the fund if the fee were not adopted? So for instance, under line item 383.130, the special assessments, would that get dropped? Under, let's see, 392.001, the transfers from the general fund, would that narrative change where it's indicated that that line is used to supplement, it's general fund tax revenue used to supplement the fee? So would that narrative then change? And then likewise, if there were a fee adopted and that were to generate revenue above what's spent in a particular program year, would that then go back? Would that be remitted to the general fund to pay back the transfers that were made to supplement the revenue?
I'll answer a couple of those questions, and I'm sorry, Ms. Strickland, you may have to repeat a few of them just so we make sure that we don't miss any of them. I'll ask Dave Modricker to address the question of the assessment, the video assessment, and whether or not that would have been different with respect to the inclusion of a stormwater fund. The short answer to the other questions, I think, is yes. If the board elects not to proceed or pursue the implementation of a stormwater fee, then there wouldn't be a need anyway. It's not to say you couldn't, but there wouldn't be a real compelling need to continue to manage a separate stormwater fund. The idea behind incorporating it in the 2021 operating budget was to really be able to segregate that cost center, to highlight it for the elected officials and for the general public, and then also to prepare the way, presumably, for a 2022 implementation of a stormwater management utility fee, or even at the time, there was some consideration for potentially pursuing that in 2021. I think that door is closed. But if the board elects in February at the public hearing not to move ahead with a stormwater management utility fee, then it's likely that in 2022, transfers would be remitted back to the funds that they were originally transferred from, and the stormwater fund would be dissolved. Unless the board wanted to continue to segregate that as a cost center, which you could.
Because
I was just going to say that I do see some advantages to separating as a cost center no matter what, but that would be a discussion to follow any decision on a fee. But I do see some advantage to having a fund like we have the Transportation Improvement Fund, which, or other funds that are funded from general fund revenue. But that, I mean, that's something that we could certainly discuss when things are resolved, as far as the idea of a fee.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Certainly, I think one of the things that one of the messages I've been trying to deliver since the inception of this analysis was that stormwater, much like potable drinking water or sanitary sewer service, is truly a utility. And if you look at it through that lens, then it stands to reason that you would segregate it as its own cost center in the budget so that you can continue to evaluate its impact year to year. It can accrue a fund balance. You can fund large-scale capital improvements without necessarily dipping in to other fund balances or depleting other reserves. So it's something for the board to consider, irrespective of whether you elect to pursue a stormwater management utility fee, but it's not necessarily required that you would do so. It would kind of depend on what value you see in it.
It looks like Eric.
Yeah, the issue that I see is, to try to combine it back in with the TIF is that stormwater doesn't necessarily tie to roads in like 100% correlation. We could potentially put storm pipe unrelated to a road project, and you could combine them if you wanted to back to work. But I thought the TIF was more for the road as opposed to, because it's a transportation fund as opposed to stormwater.
Right. The way the fund is structured right now is really based upon the creation and the adoption of the fee. So I guess that's really my question, is why include it in this structure this way? So I understand what you're saying. Those expenses could be contained back in Public Works and TIF, because it's not a utility with a separate authority like water, like the water authority is. So, that this is what I was getting at last time, was that, the amounts are reflective of what's in the program years for the fee program. And so having the entire fund structured on the fee, I guess I'm concerned with that. So I'll leave it at that. I understand what you're saying. And then would those revenues, if the fee were to generate revenues that went over the expenditures, would those go to pay back the general fund transfers?
Well, there wouldn't necessarily be a need. I think we would account for that, meaning if the board elected to pursue a stormwater fee for fiscal year 2022, that revenue would show under Fund 20, the stormwater fund, beginning the year that it was collected. There's not much, and again, I would look to Dave to add any clarity to this, but that's been incorporated in Fund 20 that's out of our normal course of doing business. Meaning there's not a great deal of value added or things that we would only be doing if we were to implement a stormwater fee. Maybe there are some nuances, or we wouldn't necessarily be as aggressive in pipe assessments or things along those lines, but it would not be any major swings in what you see reflected in the expenditures of that fund. I think there's some criticism or feedback that we've heard from the public that, without its own sustained separate source of income or revenue, that there's no justification for bringing or designating it as a separate governmental fund. And frankly, of the 15 or so funds that the township manages, aside from the general fund, really only 3 have their own sustained source of income. One being the street light assessments, the other being the fire hydrant assessments, and then thirdly, at least indirectly, the Transportation Improvement Fund, which has a designated earmark from the general fund or a designated appropriation from tax income. So it's not true to say that a fund should not be segregated or designated as an independent fund unless it has its own source of income or own source of revenue. What you really want to look at is, does the cost center justify its own segregated fund? And is there a need to establish and roll over a fund balance in that particular fund? If you look at it through that lens, then, it's a little bit divorced, so to speak, from the decision the board makes whether or not to enact a stormwater management utility fee, which is really just a revenue stream that can supplement that fund.
I agree with that. And that was, I did say that at the last meeting, that I appreciate that there was a separate fund. My issue is the way it's structured at this point. So, and including it in this year's budget with this structure reliant on the fee as it states in here. So I'll leave it at that.
Is there any value in me adding commentary, or did Dave address the question?
I would appreciate the commentary.
Okay. I think the only item that was increased, and I would say most of the items are less than what would be in a program if a stormwater fee was adopted, is the contracted services. And the reason that one line item was increased is that over the last course of the 3 years of the study, that was an area that was quite a bit of focus from the Stormwater Advisory Committee, saying that really no matter what we do, the priority is is learn more about your system and the condition of it. And I would say for that reason, staff requested, additional funding above and beyond normal budget years for that item. Other than that, really the associated costs are other items that were already in a CIP or in an operating budget. So, it's something that we learned from a study that felt was valuable, whether we had a fee or didn't have a fee.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when we went over the cost of service last week, we saw that, the one large relining program or project is about 200,000 under what was in program year one, because it's at about 300 and it was budgeted for 5. So there is not that much more being spent. It looks like a lot because it's coming, you're bulking it out in these big transfers.
Yeah, there's no additional equipment. There's no additional manpower really. There are some interns to help do that inventory assessment, which again was identified as a priority.
Right. So I see what Eric is saying about the difficulty in incorporating it back into the other areas of the budget. But, just like I said, I'm not comfortable with the way that the fund is structured at this point. I appreciate and I understand what you're saying about the amounts not being much over what is typically spent on stormwater projects for a year. What would be interesting then is to see what it is actually over what is typically spent. I think we started to get into that a little bit at our last meeting. So that's my issue, but I understand what you're saying. It's really the structure and the inclusion of it.
So firstly, I think we can very easily reference what the minor differences are, I think, versus what we might normally see in an otherwise program year. I think that mostly has to do with the assessments. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not to say that we wouldn't do these assessments, but for the consideration of a stormwater fee. It's more in response to what we heard from the advisory committee and the board to be more proactive with those assessments in spite of the consideration of the implementation of a stormwater fee. I'm not entirely following the structure comment. It would either be, is it the structure, is it meaning just the prospect of creating a Fund 20 or a separate stormwater management fund in general, or is it something within that fund? like you're supportive of the fund overall, but maybe not necessarily the components that are included in it. I'm just having a hard time following that point.
Well, several things. I've pointed out before that there are items included in the fund that directly relate to program years of the fee, the program associated with the fee. So yes, I would have preferred those things not be incorporated prior to a fee being in place. But what I'm bringing up today is the language in the narrative and also the elements of the stormwater fund that directly relate back to a fee being imposed. So in the narrative, it's stating that the program is intended to be self-sustaining with fees. And then we have two items in here with transfers from the general fund and transfers from the TIF that are supposed to supplement a fee. So including this fund seems premature in this.
So it's the word fee that's in the narrative that you're referring to. It appears twice. Is that what you mean right now when you're talking about the structure?
Yeah.
Can that word be changed to something else, Dave, that's a synonym that's not the word fee, but means the same thing, like revenue? Does the word revenue work there? I'm sorry, I'm not like.
I mean, it could be. I wouldn't want to be given that the board has not decided the fate of the stormwater management utility fee. It's definitely challenged, Eric and I, as we drafted this budget, to try to figure out the best way to position this so that it could still be considered, that it wasn't disingenuous to residents who are reading this who may think that this is a settled issue one way or the other, meaning that the board has elected to pursue a fee or elected not to pursue a fee, but still, kind of put us in a good spot that if there is a decision made in February, one way or the other, that we can, be nimble, so to speak, and modify the budget in future program years. I don't think that there's, I'd be interested, if there's specific examples or things that you're concerned about, Ms. Strickland, I'm not sure what is included in the fund that is entirely reliant or contingent on the enactment of a fee, other than maybe, and again, this is kind of a separate issue than the fee itself, but the feedback that we heard from the advisory committee and others that you wanted to be more aggressive in your assessment of the condition and infrastructure of our storm pipes.
What if we changed the language in that second to last sentence of the initial of the narrative?
You could, like I said, I'm just concerned that it is delivering a message that may or may not be accurate based on the board's decision in February to pursue or not to pursue a stormwater.
Right. So the program could be self-sustaining. You don't have to say it's intended to be self-sustaining.
Right. Yeah, you could modify the language so it says that the board has not made any decisions on a fee at this point too.
I don't think that changes the meaning in terms of having to re-advertise either. I think it just clarifies what our intent is. We didn't.
No, it certainly would not have to be re-advertised.
No.
You could amend.
So I think that sounds like it might resolve. It's kind of nuanced, but I think what Lisa's bringing up is pretty nuanced. So I think that it would convey the proper meaning without leaving any potential out, and that Dave wants to be transparent about. Dave E and Dave M.
I would be okay with modifying the language in the narrative slightly. I don't want to be, I want to be forthright about the intent of the consideration, and I don't want to be, too vague about what is being proposed. A stormwater fee is being proposed, and it is intended to be self-sustaining, if that's the direction that the board elects to go.
It would be consistent with your last sentence, Dave, because you used the may be supported. the program could be self-sustaining, and then your last sentence is the program may be supported by tax revenue.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm fine with changing that to be less direct if it's, you know, maybe or you know, something like that, if that's what satisfies, you know, the concerns that Strickland has.
Actually, would it work to just change the last sentence where it says initially the program may be supported by tax revenues to saying in, I'm trying to think of the right wording.
Remove the word initially.
Yeah. I was trying to think whether we should say something else like, you know, in the absence of a stormwater fee, which would apply in 2021 anyway, the program may be supported by tax revenue
That'd be consistent.
instead of just saying initially. And that would leave open would then address if we didn't have a stormwater fee, that we would continue to have this stormwater fund or could continue.
Maybe.
We can, I guess we can massage, you know, some of that narrative a little bit to be less direct or less commit, you know.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's a change. It does not make any substantial change to the document, so, or certainly not substantive in terms of the budget, so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be sensitive that all board members feel like the right meaning is conveyed. And I don't think, from what I can tell anyway, of understanding Lisa's conveyance, that that this is about changing meaning, but making sure that we convey both possibilities. So I think that the fixes that we came up with seem like they do that.
Yeah, I echo Dave's concerns about, you know, I'm worried about it looking like, well, I would really have to think about this. I'm concerned about wordsmithing our way into being non-transparent here. So, you know, it's the program is intended. So it's this program that we're considering, and those funds that were discussed in that level of service or the cost of service program are attached to that fee. So, you know, if this were just to be a breakdown of expenses usually attributed to public works, the TIF, it would look different than this. And so you know, the way this is laid out, I understand the changes you're trying to make so that you won't have to make changes, I guess, if there is no fee. Yeah,
How would it look different? How would it look different? Maybe I misunderstood you. How would it?
Go ahead.
I just don't know how it would look different.
What would look different?
Well, you said if this were the something, it would look different.
I think the question is whether if the board were not considering a stormwater fee, set the fee or the revenue source aside for a moment, and you were just interested in segregating the cost center of stormwater management, would the expenditures under Fund 20 look different?
Thanks. That's it.
I mean, I think
My understanding is not really, other than maybe the pipe assessment, because multiple groups said assess through that process.
I think there are probably, it's probably a difficult answer to provide exactly because, you know, there's components that emerged, or there were discussion items and expenditures that emerged by virtue of just the discussion that took place by the Stormwater Advisory Committee, like being more aggressive with storm pipe assessments and video assessments, that would not have necessarily emerged but for our convening of a stormwater advisory committee in consideration of this fee. It's not to say the board, they're not to say they're not good ideas and that the board and staff wouldn't want to elect to pursue them, but presumably they may not have been discussed. And if that were the case, then what Dave would probably be doing as he prepared his budget is, we would be assessing conditions of pipes associated with paving projects and, maybe more normal course of business that we did. So there would probably be some differences in what you would see under a Fund 20 if the board just said, we just want to segregate this cost center, because we wouldn't have had those other discussion points throughout the process and the feasibility study that we did and that are presented here under Fund 20. But there are not, what I would call maybe major cost drivers. We're not purchasing new equipment. We're not bringing on additional staff. We're not doing the value added things that, are maybe nice to do, but we just aren't proposing under that first year of the program because, of the board's, at least to date, uncertainty about whether you want to pursue that fee or not. Because while these are things that, as I said, we would like to do, and they're good best management practices for your infrastructure, dependent on what the revenue stream is or what the disposable income is that we can expend on those things, we may defer or push out through a number of years, which may or may not be the right decision. That's a policy decision the board's going to be asked to make in February.
It's, so having populated all the values in that fund, I can tell you that, we went over it during the budget process, and there are few items that were, added as a result of the 3-year study. And it was the items we talked about, the part interns to assess the inlets, the funding for the storm pipe inventory. And somewhere, I think we are picking up an additional data collector that, we use in-house for a lot of asset management to help collect the data if our data collectors are all busy while the interns are out doing inlet inspections.
Yeah, we can certainly go through, even line item by line item under Fund 20 and, identify which are things that we would be doing under normal course and which are just things that we realize are a good idea that we ought to be doing. But none of them are particularly, at least intertwined, foundationally to the imposition of a stormwater utility fee. These are things that we probably ought to be doing regardless.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the budget? Seeing none,
I'll
Precision.
Yeah, so I'll sort of make a brief comment. And so this, I'm, while Ms. Strickland actually was talking about the details, I'm more concerned about the deficit in our drawing, whatever, over $1 million from the general fund, and things being sort of generally unsustainable if we go this route. I do understand that my role is, it's the manager's role to create the budget. And so my role is to just say yes or no. I appreciate the consultations that have been done. And I'll possibly, we have an agenda item for a future year, I think next year, January meeting, to have some sort of financial subcommittee, which would look at the whole picture and advise us on different ways we could address this issue. So that's sort of the comment that I'll make.
Okay, I would say, just as a response to that our role is not to say yes or no. Our role has been to spend significant time going over the budget, and at any point we can make a change by a vote of the board.
Sure.
So, and we have made some Clearly not at a level that would balance the budget with the current income and expenditures, but I do think that we're doing more than saying yes or no to the budget. We're doing a fairly significant analysis as we go through. So, any other comments?
Well, I guess I'll make a comment.
Okay.
I do also share concern about spending, but I share a concern about the cuts that we made as well. I don't think I've ever seen myself suggest so many cuts in our budget, and that's also not sustainable. So I guess just in the spirit of balance, I'll just make that comment, keep it brief. Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing none, I'll ask Dave to do a roll call vote on this resolution.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-35. Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra,
No.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
No.
Ms. Denini.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, repealing Resolution 2019-30 and establishing a new Ferguson Township schedule of fees.
Thanks. I'll ask Centrice, the Assistant Manager, to introduce the resolution.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. Provided with the agenda is a copy of the resolution advertised for public hearing to establish the 2021 Ferguson Township Schedule of Fees. The board reviewed the draft at the last meeting, the regular meeting held on December 7th, and significant changes in the 2021 fee schedule included the establishment fees for workforce unit fee in lieu and establishment of fees for land development review, as well as revised fees for the solid waste services determined by Center County Recycling and Refuse Authority, as well as the health inspection services for eating and drinking establishments determined by the State College Borough Health Department, and 1 and 2 family residential for new industrial housing only, and non-1 and 2 family residential, as well as fire safety permits, rental housing permits, and plan review fees determined by Center Region Code Administration Office. I'll also take this time to inform the board that staff recommends the removal of the workforce housing unit fee in lieu from the adopted 2021 fee schedule, with the intent to amend the 2021 fee schedule after the workforce housing ordinance is approved and then enacted. Staff also recommends the removal of the fees for the land development review because staff just needs more time to dive deeper to review the ordinance and the MPC to establish how best to determine the reasonable and necessary fees that meet the requirements of our township ordinance, and review how the township's current permit fees tie into what we are doing now, so we are avoiding any double charging. And with that, I'll answer any questions or entertain any comments.
Okay, I guess my question, the changes that you were recommending, are those changes to what we have in front of us, or were those changes made already?
Right. Those changes, the request or recommendation that staff is making is to remove what's currently provided in the agenda packet as requested by the board.
Okay.
So you need an amendment, or?
So what we would need
We
to
would
do-
ask for a motion to amend, removing both those fees. It would not have to be re-advertised since it's just a resolution. It can be approved this evening. But based on our review since the board's last talked about this a week ago, those two amendments that Centrise is recommending, we would ask for formal action to be taken to at least temporarily remove those.
Okay, so you want the motion to amend first and then the motion
No,
for the
We'll
resolution?
need a motion first. We'll need a motion to adopt the resolution.
Oh,
and then a motion to
darn.
amend.
Okay.
I think that's the best way to do that. Yeah.
Okay, I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution repealing Resolution 2019-30 and establishing a new Ferguson Township schedule of fees for 2021.
Sanjit, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Now we can make a motion to amend the resolution.
I, Laura, move to amend the schedule of fees resolution by removing the workforce fee in lieu and the land development fees that we added last time.
Sanjit, second.
Okay, so we'll start with a vote on the motion to amend. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Thanks for looking into that, and I look forward to moving it forward if and when we can. Thank you.
Right, the board will see the fee schedule amendment on January 18th when you consider, or January 4th, excuse me, when you consider the workforce housing ordinance. We would just tee that up right afterward. And I think we can be ready to present a recommendation on the land development review fees. There's just a few complications that I think, we want to take a deeper dive into before we're prepared to move forward with that. We'll try to be ready for the 4th.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have a simple procedural question. So suppose we pass this new set of fees. They are going to come into effect from January 1st.
That's correct.
And so from January 1st until the point we pass those two other fees, those two fees will not be there. Does that create a sort of a gap that could be sort of exploited or things like that?
I don't think so, because we wouldn't, except for, I guess, presumably any new land development applications that are submitted between now and January and when the board incorporates those fees, so January 4th at the earliest, would not be obligated to pay those fees because you can't retroactively apply review fees to development proposals that are currently under review. But I don't expect there will be many, if any of them, that are submitted before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, so that's my only concern, is that if we create this gap, if somebody goes in and apply, this is, I don't know when this is going to be effective. Is it going to be effective right now? But whatever the time period, if there is a hole, then someone files something and then we have to litigate it and things like that. The other way would be to pass the, reject the amendment, pass the thing as it is. And when we are ready to supplant those two fees with the new fees, we come and say that is gone and this is amended. I'm agnostic to whichever one, but whatever makes sense. I'm just trying to point out if there is an issue here.
I think we're talking about fees that are so small that it wouldn't encourage anybody to try to do a loophole,
Sure.
to try to do something in order to avoid a small fee.
Then let's go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment first. And this is just a voice vote. So all in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And now I'm going to take a step back, and since this is a public hearing, I need to specifically request any public input on this schedule of fees. And seeing none, we will continue then with a vote on the schedule of fees. And this will be a roll call vote because it's a resolution.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-36. Mr. Mitra?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Danini?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes. Okay, that motion carries. Now we move to the new business. First item is the consent agenda. We have 2 contracts, accepting a voucher report from November, accepting the 2021 Planning Commission schedules and work programs, 3 revised phasing schedules for PRDs and TTD, and we are adding a surety reduction that we received the information about during the day today. So those are all consent agenda items. If anyone cares to pull any of those items off for discussion, this will be a time. Lisa?
I wanted to, sorry, I'm just taking a quick look at the Planning Commission work program. And I just wanted to talk about adding something in there for them to talk about. So if we could pull that off.
Okay, that's the work, just the work program part of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we'll pull that off as a separate item for discussion then. And are there anything else on the consent agenda that anyone wanted to discuss? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I personally move that we approve the consent agenda.
This is Patty. I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye. Sorry. Aye.
No problem. Okay, did not hear any no's, so we'll say it was passed. Okay, then we have the zoning appeals request for variances. There's a request for a variance for 3795 West College Avenue.
Thank you. So provided with your agenda this evening is a copy of the application for variance that was submitted. The variance is requested by State College Borough Water Authority for property at 3795 West College Avenue, Zone Rural Agricultural. The variance requested is from Chapter 27, Section 701, Floodplain Conservation Use Buffer to replace an existing bridge on State Route 26 or West College Avenue in the approximate area of the intersection with Shingletown Road. So this is just about where, well, adjacent to where the intersection realignment and signalization project by PennDOT is beginning design and construction in the next year to 2. So bridge performance is, as I said, being done in concurrence with the widening project to allow for enhanced traffic circulation. And the requirement for State College Borough Water Authority is that a 12-inch water main be relocated, which would encroach in the floodplain. So staff is recommending the board remain neutral on the request for variance.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors remain neutral on the request for the variance at 3795 West College Avenue.
This is Patty. I second.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Laura?
Thanks. So typically the board opposes the variance that encroaches into floodplain, but did we also ask for this widening of this bridge to enhance bicycle mobility in this corridor?
I don't know whether the board formally asked for it, but it was a topic of discussion as PennDOT was going through its connects process, which included board and public involvement, that there was some interest in bicycle mobility being improved through that corridor. I don't know whether it directly relates to the relocation of the water main, but it did relate to the reconstruction and widening of that bridge.
There's some other reason we would remain neutral on encroachment into a floodplain?
For my part, I would normally object to anything that puts a structure in a floodplain. But since this is not really a structure, it's just a relocation of a underground pipe, I guess I don't see any problem that would cause me to object.
Right. I think I think Mr. Miller's point is why staff has not recommended a position be taken by the board. Typically, I think as Ms. Denneny pointed out, the board has taken a position of opposition to floodplain encroachments and variances that are requested from our floodplain regulations, primarily as they relate to structures which have the potential to increase the elevations of those floodplains. So, and that could also, and the reason the township has I think historically taken standing in those kinds of applications is because that could impact flood insurance premiums for residents of the township as are rated by FEMA on their flood insurance map. So in this particular application, and in other applications too, historically, where the applicant has been able to demonstrate through a hydraulic and hydrologic analysis that they weren't going to be increasing those flood elevations, then the township might take a position of neutrality or not get involved. This case, there's no new structures being added that would have an impact on the base flood elevations. So we haven't recommended a position or required that they pursue that analysis for this particular application.
Thank you for that review and reminder.
So this is a pipe, and if it goes through there in the floodplain, we see no significant risk to the pipe bursting or being affected, or the flood being impacted in any way.
Well, without having any of the engineers for State College Borough Water Authority, I don't want to try to guess too much on the technical issues of it. But I mean, we dealt pretty extensively with this same or similar issue, I should say, with respect to the construction of the Nixon Coker water treatment facility that they have a land development plan that was recently approved for. And as the board was discussing that concern, I think the Water Authority and Gwynn Dobson and Foreman's response was that their, the integrity, the structural integrity of their infrastructure and their pipes is well suited to handle, the kinds of issues that you might expect to see in a floodplain area. So because you commonly see, wells and other infrastructure and appurtenances for potable water supply in a floodplain. So, this is something I think they have a good deal of familiarity with, and without speaking directly with them, I don't think it will be a particular concern for this application.
Sure, and we have some checks and balances to make sure that whatever they're doing, there's an engineering review or something which will, if they're not using the right type of things which can go in a floodplain, and there's some gatekeeping that'll be done at some point where we can catch that.
Right, and the Water Authority has specifications too that they require be met for their infrastructure as well.
Thank you.
I don't know that we necessarily review. We could if we're asked. Certainly DEP and others are going to review it because they're going to cross slab cabin run. I can speak in great generalities, but I haven't looked at their detailed drawings or to see if they're using, restrained joint ductile pipe. But I mean, you would think they will know what they need to do to cross the wetland and slab cabin run. And typically that's what they would do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anything else? The motion is to remain neutral on the variance request. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we come to a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, levying taxes and assessments for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. Provided with the agenda is a copy of the resolution advertised for public hearing. As the chairman indicated in the introduction, it is to establish assessments for fiscal year 2021. It includes real estate taxes, which are proposed to remain at 1.25% for transfer taxes of the consideration, real estate tax at 2.422 mils, earned income tax remaining at 1.4%, and then local services tax or LST remaining at $52 per person, $5 of which is remitted to State College Area School District. The only changes that you'll see reflect an increase in the fire hydrant assessments from 15 cents per lineal foot and I can elaborate on that if you'd like, to 25 cents per lineal foot. This is in response to an increase in the water rates from the State College Borough Water Authority. There's also a proposed increase in the street light assessments from 27 cents to 29 cents per lineal foot to accommodate increases in the distribution for electricity costs for assessed by First Energy.
Thank you. And this is a public hearing, so I'll ask if anyone cares to comment on the taxes and assessments for the fiscal year. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution levying taxes and assessments for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021.
President, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a resolution, so it's a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-37. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Danini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mr. Mitra.
Yes.
motion carries. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, repealing Resolution 2019-32 and adopting a revised compensation plan for non-uniformed employees with an effective date of January 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Again, provided with your agenda is a copy of the resolution that's been advertised for public hearing. For 2021, the Board of Supervisors authorized a 1.5% cost of living adjustment for all non-uniformed employees. That revised compensation plan and salary schedule reflects that 1.5% increase for cost of living allowance. As in prior years, employees move through their respective pay ranges by achieving merit increases in their annual performance reviews.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so I'll ask if there's any comment from the public on the compensation plan. Seeing none, I'll ask for motion.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution repealing Resolution 2019-32 and adopting a revised compensation plan for non-uniformed employees with an effective date of January 1st, 2021.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Okay, it's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a resolution, so it's a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-38. Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Danini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
okay, the motion carries. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, establishing contributions to the police pension fund by its members.
Thank you. This is an annual exercise that's asked by the Board of Supervisors. This is in accordance with Pennsylvania Act 205. Board's required to establish an annual contribution rate paid for by members of the police pension plan. Provided with the agenda is a copy of that resolution advertised for public hearing based on our actuarial valuations that are performed by Dave Killick, the pension actuary. Our minimum municipal certification provided to the board on August 17th reflected a 5% contribution from members to the police pension fund in 2021. This is the maximum that's authorized under PA Act 600 and is of course required to keep our plan actuarially sound.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so is there anyone who cares to address the board on this issue? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution establishing contributions to the police pension fund by its members.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a resolution, so it's a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-39. Ms. Danini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, repealing Resolution 2015-29 and establishing a new approved list of tree species, cultivars, and hybrids for street and park planting.
I'll fade to the background for the remainder of the meeting and ask Dave Modricker to introduce these last few items here. I'll first ask him to unmute.
Thank you, Dave. Included in the agenda packet is a revised street tree list. This list was updated by the Township Arborist, reviewed by the Tree Commission over the course of several meetings, predominantly to remove certain non-native trees. I have a few listed in the narrative: golden rain tree, Colorado blue spruce, hedge maple. I don't believe any new trees were added. As I mentioned, the Tree Commission did review the item and recommends the update. The recommended motion is that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution repealing Resolution 2015-29 and establishing a new approved list of trees, species, cultivars, hybrids for street and park planting. So this list is for street trees and is a guide for park tree plantings.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'll ask if anyone in the public cares to address the board on the list of tree species, ... Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution repealing Resolution 2015-29 and establishing a new approved list of tree species, cultivars, and hybrids for street and park planting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I saw on the list that there was an Ohio buckeye tree, native or not. There's no room for that here in Ferguson Township.
You know, I really did think about all the questions I might be asked on that street tree list, because I'm a lot more familiar with it than the official plant list. I was not prepared for that, so but
I was surprised those little chocolate candies grew on trees.
I can appreciate
That's what they do.
This sounds like someone who has dealt with one before.
I can really appreciate that comment, though.
So funny.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, this is a resolution, so it will be a roll call vote.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-40. Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Okay. The motion carries. And we go to a public hearing on the resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Resolution 2000-22, the official township plant list as described in Exhibit A.
So again, the official township plant list is in your packet. The list is used for the selection of plants, trees, ground cover when preparing land development, landscaping plans for approval. Others can use it as a guide, but specifically that is that staff and developers and their consultants will review when preparing and submitting the land development plans. Those land development plans do go to the Tree Commission for their review and approval before the Planning Commission and the board sees them. The Tree Commission felt that plant list should be updated. They took the lead in coordination with the Township Arborist. specifically removing certain non-native trees. There are some listed to remove invasive trees, shrubs, and ground cover. And some new native trees, shrubs, and ground cover were added to the list.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the public who cares to address the board on the list of approved trees. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution amending Resolution 2000-22, the official township plant list as described in Exhibit A.
Passanant second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Laura.
Yeah, so I just have a question about the decision, or maybe it wasn't really a decision. So thanks for all your work on this, first of all. The plant list and the tree list both needed to be revised, and so I appreciate that work a lot. So I just wondered, was there a conscious decision to not include pussy willow in the plant list? It's a native and it provides a lot of habitat. It's used in decorations and crafting, and it's attractive. And so I just wondered if there was a reason why it wasn't included in the plant list.
I do not remember any discussion on the pussy willow, and I don't even know if you pronounce it Salix discolor. I'll probably say it the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of discussion on that. I would have to defer to the arborist and the tree commission that put a lot of work into it. I don't remember any of the discussion on the pussy willow.
So if we wanted to consider adding that, is that some kind of thing where we have to re-advertise and everything? No. Okay.
Resolution, it can be amended.
But we wouldn't have the input of the tree commission at all.
Right. You could refer the item, back to the question back to the arborist and the tree commission if you'd like, and have them provide a formal response.
And still not have to re-advertise?
This will be easy to add later.
Okay, could we refer that question to them?
Yeah, I think we could ask the question, and then if they said, yeah, why not? I think we could just revise the list. I think that would be.
Okay, thank you.
I would just request that Dave Modricker is only allowed to refer to it by the Latin name, which, what did you say?
Yeah, look it back up.
No.
Plant nerds in your Latin
Yeah,
names.
Salix discolor.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't answer that. I just don't remember any specific discussion on it.
Sure, thanks so much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? In that case, this is a resolution, so it'll be a roll call vote.
Presented as Resolution 2020-41, Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Denini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Getting us to a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the chairman and secretary to execute an instrument for the declaration of restrictions and covenants with Johnson Farm Associates for the maintenance of the Haymarket Park Detention Basin.
So this was sometime in coming. You may recall that there was some desire to investigate planting trees in stormwater basins. There's been a lot of kind of resistance to that from a technical aspect of some of the stormwater, our stormwater engineer. However, we are going to move ahead, I guess, subject to your approval, with a pilot project to plant trees in the stormwater basin in Haymarket Park. That seems like a good candidate to give this a trial. We realized through this process that while the township owns the basin, there are certain other maintenance responsibilities performed by another party. There's, a lot of history as to how we got that way, but Johnson Farm Associates has certain maintenance obligations. So we asked them to be signatory to an agreement. They are agreeable. Part of that new agreement puts some of the maintenance responsibility, specifically because we're planting trees, on the Ferguson Township Public Works Department. We will assume that responsibility. I reviewed the language enough to know that it's not, overly burdensome. We basically have to make sure that tree debris doesn't clog the outlet structure so that the basin functions properly. You may recall that through cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we've already put a new pollinator type mix on the basin bottom, suitable for the amount of water it does or doesn't get at times. And in the spring, through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we would like to plant seedlings in the basin bottom.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is a public hearing, so if anyone cares to address the board on this agreement. Seeing none, I'd take a motion.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution authorizing the chairman and secretary to execute an instrument for the declaration of restrictions and covenants with Johnson Farm Associates for the maintenance of the Haymarket Park Detention Basin.
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Okay. The motion a second. Is there any discussion?
Sorry, a basic question.
Yes.
So who's the chairman and who's the secretary? So is this the chairman of the board and what does?
Yeah, I'm the chair and Dave is the secretary.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was looking for the secretary. Yeah.
Yeah, we will designate that at the first meeting in January. We always appoint the manager as the secretary for.
Got it. Thanks.
So, I just wanted to comment that I'm glad to see this occurring because I've thought for a long time that anything we can do with that basin to make a more natural area instead of just a mowed field is great. And I love the pollinator mix, and I think adding trees will make it a actual park amenity rather than a field to collect a lot of water. So if there's no other discussion, this is a roll call vote. This is the resolution.
Presented as Resolution 2020-42, Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Denini,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we have the item from the consent agenda, which is the 2021 Ferguson Township Planning Commission Work Program. So Lisa wanted to add some discussion of that.
Thank you. I did. I just, in going through some of those items, I was wondering if the Planning Commission and Jenna, if they had discussed it all, looking at the TSD, since we've pulled it off of having the consultant brought in to, renew or review or redo the ordinance, if the Planning Commission could take a look at it, maybe put it as a low priority item around where the alleys and private streets are. They've got a lot of collected knowledge on that area and might be able to do something with what we have. So I would be interested in their input and feedback As like I said, maybe as I would want it as a higher priority item, but if it fits in as a lower priority item, to see what they could do with it as they have time. I was wondering if you discussed it and what everybody thought about that.
For the Terrace Streetscape rewrite, the majority of the conversation since the project was pulled for 2021 is really item 12, the alley and private street study. That has been a main goal of some members of the Planning Commission. I think it will definitely play into the ability of the Pine Grove Mills small area plan to really come to fruition based on that plan. There are a lot of aspects of the alleys and private streets that directly impact future development in these areas. And I think historically the board has always taken a back seat to the alley discussion, and it may need to change, and it's really, it just depends on the board's temperature of that. But I think that's been a definite area that Planning Commission has wanted to review.
I was really happy to see that on there. I know in the Pine Grove Mills small area plan meetings, some people came to those meetings just to talk about alleys. So it's a big issue. So I was really happy to see that on there. But if you thought that there would be time for them to review the ordinance and to look at things that are going in there, kind of like what we were talking about today or earlier with the brewery that's going in, to look at things that are going in, things you don't know about, so on.
Yeah, my approach to this area would be more proactive as opposed to reactive to what we're seeing, and really to come up with a plan for what we would want to see in this area. That's probably the biggest thing with ordinance amendments, not having a plan in place to really push those zoning ordinance language and the amendments that we want to see. So yeah, definitely.
That's a good point. So maybe if they had time to have them look at the ordinance in anticipation of a consultant coming in to see what we have. I'd be interested in what others thought about that. I was just thinking about that.
I have an opinion on that. I'm specifically interested in answering a question about the boundaries of the TSD. So I'm not sure how I feel about delving into uses and dimensions and design and all of that without a consultant guiding us. But yeah, I think there's no harm in having some conversation about it. But I do have like a very specific question about the TSD boundaries. And I don't know, I mean, I could bring it to the consent agenda, but I can bring it up now since Lisa brought the TSD up as a potential topic for the Planning Commission. So if you were to look at the TSD boundaries, the map of the TSD, on both the east end and the west end, the alley is the boundary in the back, but in the middle, Beaver Avenue is the boundary, and the place where that is the boundary is a residential district. And it seems like an odd decision to have made to deepen the boundary in that area. And so my specific question would be, does it make sense to reach out to those landowners to see what they think about that particular choice? And if they would prefer to keep it residential, considering moving the boundary of that. So it certainly does relate to the TSD. I think, I hesitate to say it, I think it might be a little bit more simple of a question than the, review of the entire zoning milieu of the TSD. And it could get a conversation started. That's all I have to say about that. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that this is not something we need to actually take action on. I think we can ask Jenna to convey the request that they at least consider putting that on as a lower priority item. So all I would want at this point, I think, is just a motion to accept the Ferguson Township Planning Commission work program, and then we'll ask Jen to make that request of the.
Ilar, move to accept the Ferguson Township Planning Commission work program for 2021.
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And I believe that moves us to reports. COG committee reports. The Finance Committee did meet. We discussed the prioritization schedule, and as the Finance Committee often does, we bumped it to the Executive Committee to do something with. Mostly because it involves an awful lot of other committee interactions, so the Executive Committee will be looking at that list. It is available if anybody wants to take a look at the prioritizations. It would be on the COG website. If you go to the Finance Committee agenda, it was attached to that. So, and it will be attached to the Executive Committee agenda. So, and
Thanks. It's a good thing to take a look at. It was pretty extensive.
Yep.
Hey, Steve, are we going to have a general forum meeting?
I doubt it.
Okay.
The Executive Committee's meeting tomorrow, and
yeah,
I don't know of anything urgent enough that we'd have a meeting at this point. So,
okay.
my guess is we will be canceling.
Thanks.
Yep.
I'm holding you to it.
Yep. Next is we have the SBPA working group.
I didn't attend. Eric Anderson is our representative on that group. I don't know if Eric had a chance to sit in on that meeting. Otherwise, it's just.
Yeah, no, I did not, unfortunately.
Okay.
So that's the solar power purchase agreement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that through COG and Penn State, that one?
Yeah.
Not Penn State, COG and the school district.
Yeah, the school district has really been taking the initiative on this group, but I know that the COG finance director, Joe Vigilone, has been also providing a lot of staff support for it. As I understand, really, I mean, the agreement for consulting services to prepare the request for proposals, which was approved and signed kind of in the midst of the pandemic. Now, I think the process that the SPPA is moving ahead with is just engaging that consultant and beginning to turn the wheels on that RFP. It was delayed a little bit given conditions and everything, but I think they're trying to pick the mantle back up and carry that ball forward next year.
Mm. Now, is this the thing that recently there was that COG agency report about how some staff are going to give reports to other municipalities about how they could do these things? Is that what this thing?
Don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
Sorry.
Is Pam Adams working on this?
There's talking a lot of credits.
Oh,
and trying to buy and sell credits.
No, I think there is some cross-pollination maybe between the two initiatives, but what Pam is working on is the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and strategy. I know that she's, I don't know whether specifically that relates to the point you just made, but I know it was, you know, something that was on her radar to do some outreach and education through sustainable, the Sustainable Communities Collaborative and Sustainable Pittsburgh.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Okay. Next, we have the Planning and Zoning Director's report.
Nothing has really changed significantly from the meeting on the 7th. We have 2 additional subdivision and land development plans, and the zoning hearing board, which you reviewed tonight, that will be taking place in January for that.
Thank you. And Chief of Police.
Thank you. The police department's report is with your packet. Since I wasn't at the board meeting for November, some of my incidents will commingle. I'll commingle information between October and November's report. Halloween weekend, officers handled a large party. There was approximately 150 guests. The officers dispersed the group, issued several citations to the party host, and also referred them to Penn State University Office of Student Conduct. Also that same weekend, officers responded to a local motel for a possible domestic dispute. Just before the officers arrived, they were notified that the suspect broke out the second floor window of his motel room and began throwing furniture out the window. Officer spoke with the gentleman's girlfriend and learned that the man was intoxicated, had mental health issues, and had barricaded himself in the room with a handgun. Officers evacuated guests from nearby motel rooms. They were able to communicate with the man and resolve the incident without injury. He was taken to the hospital for evaluation and eventually arraigned on charges of criminal mischief and disorderly conduct. He caused about $8,000 worth of damage to the motel room. Officers responded to a call for an abandoned vehicle close to a dumpster. They arrived and found a gecko was inside a cage on a cold October day. Animal was still alive and we were able to rehome it. Victim was scammed out of $7,000. The scammer contacted the victim and reported that his credentials were stolen and used overseas. The scammer directed the victim to pay a fee to fix the problem, and the victim did so. We have an international student that was the victim of an extortion crime. Essentially, the scammer contacted the student claiming to have intercepted a package full of fake passports. Scammer demanded $59,000 to remedy the problem, and the victim wired $59,000 to the scammer. We had a heroin overdose. We had several sexual assaults, child abuse investigations. And to end on a positive note, this is our 3rd year of our No Shave November. Officers raised over $1,600. That money will go to Toys for Tots and the Angel Tree Food Bank. And as well as this will be the first year that we're going to do Shop with a Cop. But unfortunately with COVID, we're not actually going to be going out shopping with the kids. We have a list of toys and supplies that the kids want. So we're going to go buy those items and give those gifts and gift certificates to the families. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Guess, do we have any communications to the board that bring up at this point?
Yeah, I had a bunch of emails from residents who essentially are requesting a special meeting with the board and about the stormwater fee before the February 1st meeting. And So that's, there were some back and forths. And essentially, they want to be able to see and view who the speakers are, who is attending the meeting, and so on and so forth. So I'll stop there and, yeah.
Thank you. And, okay, we don't have any calendar items. We will have a couple of executive sessions in the next week or two. And other than that, I think we're
I'll just
about done.
report that we're prepared for winter operations.
Oh, good.
Hence Mr. Snowman.
Oh, is that what that is behind you?
That's a snowman.
Nice.
So everybody's ready to drive then.
Yep.
Good.
So just going back to what Prasenjit said, so we're in the middle of scheduling a work session specifically devoted to the stormwater fee, and that did come out. The date wasn't announced yet, but the intention to have it did come out on our schedule. I don't know, was it even months ago now that we issued that schedule? But
November 16th, yeah.
yeah, so okay, so month ago. So, as always, each time we've talked about the stormwater fee, the meeting will be public and people can see us. We don't really have control over whether a resident chooses to turn on their camera, though. I think a lot of residents in this virtual environment just choose not to turn on their camera. So
It does depend on how we set up the meeting, whether it's
Yeah, admittedly, I'm a little bit at a loss. I've heard that same request that Mr. Mitra just articulated from some residents that they want to see who's on the call. I've been, providing, folks with the number of attendees that I have, present. But the challenge is we're limited when we set up a typical, just a Zoom meeting as opposed to a webinar, which is how this is formatted. In terms of the number of our attendees, and that number is fairly low. And it also becomes very difficult to manage because then you lose control over who is speaking, who's muted, you get a lot of ambient noise issues. I think the format of it is just not conducive to having a good dialogue by the board and staff and the consultants. The webinar format, while it doesn't allow attendees to see how many people are on the call, is a lot easier to manage and I think a lot more productive in the long run. If the board is really interested in providing that venue, then I would caution you that I think there'll be unintended consequences to that, but we could try to facilitate just a standard Zoom meeting where everyone participates, kind of on an equal platform. But I think I'd be a little bit apprehensive about some of the challenges that might bring. I guess I just don't see the advantage that there is of having attendees be able to see who else is participating or who else is on, the web.
Well, I think it's a mix though, because some attendees, when they want to speak, we can see them on their camera. So I hear what you're saying, Dave, that the format overall is the webinar format. And so you don't have like screen after screen after screen after screen after screen of like the Brady Bunch scene, kind of like all of the squares.
Right.
But when a person is talking, when we've acknowledged their public input, they can choose to click their camera then at that time, correct?
Yeah, typically. I don't know. We had an issue with that this evening with the attendees not being able to show their video. So I need to look into that on the settings and see if that was a feature that we disabled or perhaps, Zoom has been putting out a lot of enhancements over the last several months as they've ran into issues with the Zoom bombing, kind of craze. So they may have disabled the ability for attendees to activate their webcams. I think, and I don't know whether this is directly related to the concern that Mr. Mitra heard from a resident, but what I've heard from others is there's a desire for attendees to be able to see the list of attendees, you know, possibly to just know who else is on the call with them or how many people have shown up. I'm happy to provide those numbers, and I have in the past, but I just don't see a way to enable attendees to see the full roster without reverting back to the Zoom meeting format and then, you know, potentially opening up some of those other concerns or issues that may come along with it.
I don't know if this is feasible. I can sort of try it. I mean, it's if I go in and try to copy paste the list of participants, I guess it doesn't let me copy. So yeah, I was trying to just copy the list of participants and then dump it on chat right now, and it doesn't let me copy the list of participants. So I guess.
Yeah, you probably could not. What I've tried before, you know, and what I typically do, and I know that I've kind of gotten away from this, is I request that people put their names in the chat.
Right.
And if they do that and they, you know, they put
Yes.
in the chat, then any attendee or panelist can see that full list, but
There you go.
them, you know, entering that data, and it's not
Yes.
necessarily captures everybody.
We should
I
mention
think
that a
that's-
few times.
That's a really good idea because it puts the control in the hand of the participant to put their name in if they would like to. And it still ensures that we're going to be able to make sure that we can call on people in a fair and timely way to make sure everybody has input. So yeah, I think if everybody uses the chat as intended, we'll have a list of participants up there that everybody can see.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to do, because really trying to run a regular Zoom meeting with more than about 20 people is pretty much, it's unmanageable to try to do that. And speaking of the chat, Jeremy's here. So
Hey, Jeremy.
Hey,
Hey,
Jeremy.
I didn't even know you were here until you chatted.
I think that's a good solution because that's exactly the same comment that I've been hearing is they just can't see that list of participants. So if we could really, you know, encourage people to type their name in the chat.
Yeah. For the panelists, we can see the list of attendees. If you do the participants and then go to the attendees list, you can see who's here.
Mm-hmm, we can, but I think
But
the
they can't,
participants cannot.
Yeah. So
just to clarify then, so at the work session in January, there will be public comment allowed.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I intend to allow public comment at that. So, you know, prepare your pot of coffee ahead of time, and I think we'll have a long discussion. So.
Yeah, it's a good question though, because I think at a work session, if I recall correctly, it's 100% purview of the chair.
Actually, I need to modify that. I will ask the chair at the work session if come to think of it.
I would bet that no matter who is chair, they are going to be accepting public comment,
Right.
as has been the culture that we've tried to establish.
Yes, but I should not be making that commitment at this point since we're talking about a January work session. So.
Great, thank you.
So, I guess, is there anything else? If not, we can adjourn before 10 o'clock, or we could hang on for another 6 minutes and make it to 10. That looks like motions to adjourn all over the place.
Happy holidays.
We are adjourned.
Yeah.
Bye.
Next year.